just so everyone knows.
Let's talk some fantasy football. Our buddy Dave Richard is with us, CBSSports.com. Hello,
there
Dave.
He goes.
What's up, fellas? Are you racing to get Dion Jackson off your waiver wire?
I kept him in one league. Why? Did something happen to Jonathan Taylor that I haven't seen today?
Jonathan Taylor is not practicing today. He's got the ankle issue. It's seeming to be a problem. It's seemingly a problem, and I think we could potentially see him maybe be limited if he plays. You know, limited for Jonathan Taylor is still. It could be pretty good for Jonathan Taylor. That could be like 65% of the snaps pull. But Dion Jackson's now the number 2 guy behind him because they traded Naheem Hines.
That's true. Good
and
point.
I think he's worth rostering. I think you made a smart move by hanging on to him.
I did. I started him that week. He had the big week. And I have Barkley on a bye this week, so now, especially if Taylor doesn't play, I'm going to play him in this league.
You might be cruising.
Tyvis is looking at his fantasy.
I already got him.
Tyvis already has him.
Oh, you already got him? Nice.
Of course Tyvis does. I expect him to. He's smart.
By the way, he did cut Dak Prescott by mistake.
That was crazy.
I don't know. He's learned.
He gets a pass for that from me.
Yeah, all right.
Oh, I got a question. I know what I wanted to ask you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Is it Isaiah Likely? Is that his name?
The Ravens tight end.
Should I pick him up, or should I just keep rolling with Gesicki?
Gesicki is an interesting tight end. I actually did a lot of research on him today. He has 5 red zone targets and 4 end zone targets in his last 3 games. So the Dolphins clearly look to him when they're basically inside the 15, but not at the goal line or at the 2. That's Gesicki's territory. He's had an end zone target each of his past 3 games. Should have scored in 3 straight games. So if you view him as a touchdown or bust tight end, I don't mind him this week. Now, in saying that, if there is a scenario where Mark Andrews doesn't play this week for the Ravens against the Saints, Isaiah Likely, you saw what he's capable of doing on last Thursday. He could do something like that again. He's a move tight end who's better against zone coverage than man coverage, and he's pretty quick, and he's got good hands and a big catch radius, and Lamar Jackson's always favored the middle of the field. He's not particularly good throwing to the sidelines. I think that's where you could see Likely step up, but I think it takes Mark Andrews being out in order for that to happen.
And that's tricky because it's Monday Night Football for the Ravens.
Right. But so, look, here's the thing is that if Mark Andrews practices by Friday or Saturday, I think you can pretty much assume that he'll play in the game.
Right.
And if you have to make a call and you don't know whether or not Andrews is going to play, you just start Gesicki or whoever you have if you don't have Gesicki.
So, there's a couple of areas here. First of all, Hockenson, he just got traded. Does his value go up or down based on where he's moving to?
If I had to pick up or down, I think I'd say down. But honestly, I feel like it's going to stay exactly where it is, where it's going to depend on the scheme that the Vikings play against. The matchup will be a factor, and how much Kirk Cousins will have to throw will be a factor. Obviously, he's got an upgrade going from Goff to Cousins, but he's still in a crowded offense, still might see more than 5 or 6 targets in a game rarely. He's probably going to be a guy that lives around 3 or 4 catches per game. He had that monster game earlier in the year, and then everything else he's had, it's been right around 8-9 fantasy points in PPR leagues. So I'm not that excited about Hockenson for the rest of this season.
Let me give one more follow-up, too. Like, we got a lot of buys this week. You looking at flexes, guys that you're trying to get some just squeeze a game or 2 out of. We got Robert Woods, Allen Robinson, and Dobbs from Green Bay.
Green Bay.
Which one of those guys do you think is a better upside this week?
A week ago this time, I was not a Dobbs fan, but then some things happened. Christian Watson, their other rookie wide receiver, he got hurt against Buffalo. And Dobbs had to play. And remember, Alan Lazard was out for Green Bay for that game. Dobbs started making some plays, and that's a tough defense that he did it against, caught the touchdown. I like him the best, not only because of the opportunity that he has in this Green Bay offense, but they're taking on the Lions. And you saw how bad the Lions defense was last week. Not that it's the same thing. Romeo Dobbs to Tyreek Hill, not the same thing. But those Lions gave up a ton of yards, especially in the middle of the field to those Dolphins receivers. I think they're going to continue to struggle against the pass. And I think it's going to open the door for Dobbs to have another pretty good game.
I got one more question for you. Running back related. Kenyon Drake this week versus New Orleans or Joe Mixon against Carolina?
I mean, it sounds silly to even ask the question because Joe Mixon has so much more upside, and I will tell you Mixon against Carolina, and it would just make sense for the Bengals to kind of go back to trying to be more balanced offensively and try and run the football as best as they can. I don't know how much confidence they have in running the football because they should have done that on Monday against the Browns, and they couldn't do it. It was weird why they wouldn't take advantage of that matchup. I think Kenyon Drake's going to have an interesting game. It's a tough matchup against New Orleans. I actually think that Saints defense is better than they looked a couple of games ago. But he's getting a good opportunity. But Mixon gets that type of opportunity pretty much every week. And if catches count, forget about it. You know that Mixon is going to be involved in the passing game, will get good numbers there. I just think that he's an easy start over Drake. But Drake is worth taking a look at. Double check to see if he's on the waiver wire, still out there. I have it right in front of me. It's right around a third of CBS Sports leagues where he's out there, 37%. So if you can't get your hands on Dion Jackson, maybe Drake is someone who you can find and can use this week.
Another guy who's become popular, getting back to tight ends here for a minute, Dave. Greg Dulcich, is that how you say his name?
Yes, that's how you say it.
So I'm in a scenario, and I think other fans might be in this scenario as well, where I have Mark Andrews, right? And I've lost Jamar Chase, and not that he's great, but I've lost Zeke Elliott in the last 2 weeks, and I was pretty thin at running back to begin with. I'm thinking about trading Mark Andrews to upgrade at running back, trusting that Dulcich can at least be adequate. Does that make sense? In the right deal?
Well, what you're really doing is you're hoping that Dulcich is better than a streaming tight end.
Right. Yes,
and by that, I mean that he continues to put up some good yardage and find the end zone and all the stuff that you look for from somebody like Mark Andrews, but you're getting it at a discounted price, or at least a guy who you haven't heard of necessarily, fantasy managers haven't heard of, like Greg Dulcich. I'll tell you what, I thought the Broncos offense looked dead until they got Dulcich involved. And then the second half last week, you really saw it come into play. One obstacle that you'll have is that Dulcich is on bye this week. So you can't use him unless you're going to take a zero at tight end, which is loser's mentality. I don't want that at all.
Never.
You'd have to stream somebody like Tyler Conklin or maybe even Isaiah Likely as a replacement because Dulcich isn't going to play if you make this trade. The other thing that I would think about is, are you going to sell low on Mr. Andrews?
That's
because
true.
he's
Fair point.
not at 100%,
Yeah.
coming off of a bad game. No, if you try and do it today, the first thing that another fantasy manager is going to say to you is, well, we don't even know if he's healthy. I'm not going to give you a good running back for him.
Fair point.
So you need to make sure that you get a really good running back, probably a second-tier type of running back, in exchange for Mark Andrews, because Andrews is one of those guys, man, when it comes to fantasy football, he puts up numbers most weeks like a wide receiver, and you're getting that at the tight end spot. It's a huge advantage for your team.
Dave, if you're streaming quarterbacks this week, give me some off-the-radar guys maybe.
I don't know if I can give you I'll give you some off-the-radar guys, but the guy who's on the radar is Justin Fields, who's given you at least 25 fantasy points in each of his past 2 games and at least 18 fantasy points in each of his past 4. He's basically doubled his rushing production over the last 4 games, and he's throwing the ball just a little bit more. It's like 5-6 more pass attempts per game, but he's doing a much better job completing the passes. They're adding Chase Claypool in the mix. I think that'll help Fields more so than it'll do anything for Chase Claypool in fantasy. But I think he's a reliable top 10 fantasy quarterback this week against the Dolphins. The one thing he has to be able to do is navigate around the blitz. And what we've seen over the last 4 weeks from Justin Fields is that when he's pressured in the pocket, he takes off. And that's good rushing production. The other thing we've seen from Fields, by the way, and this is over the past 2 games, when they're close to the goal line, he's taking it in himself. He's running for touchdowns. And so if you're getting 12 points just from him getting 60 yards on the ground and a touchdown, he doesn't have to do that much more as a passer to be a usable fantasy quarterback. It just so happens that he's done pretty well as a passer over the last 2 weeks. And once you look in this Dolphins secondary, they've done a nice job scheming against wide receivers, but there will be opportunities downfield for the Bears to make plays, and that'll help Justin Fields. Now, you wanted me to dig deep a little bit at quarterback. I got 2 names for you. Yeah. Number 1 is Taylor Heineke, who came through for fantasy managers last week. Should get you around 20 fantasy points this week. And the other name is P.J. Walker, who's given a minimum of 18 fantasy points and a maximum of 19 fantasy points over his last 2 games. He's taking on the Bengals this week, and the Bengals defense is all bruised and battered, as you guys know, after the Browns took him down on Monday night.
Really quick, Chase Claypool is a start. Would you start him? He's on my bench right now, or do you want to go look for somebody like Pierce from the Colts?
If it's down to those 2, depending on how the reports shake out for Claypool, I might try him over Pierce, just because I think that Colts offense is really going to try and get conservative and try and protect Sam Ehlinger from making mistakes throwing the football. And Pierce is okay. I think you're looking for a receiver that can get you 10 PPR points if you're down to those two. Claypool at least has done that. It was in a different offense and with a different quarterback, but he's done that at many points already this year.
Wide receivers, top wide receivers on the board in terms of the waiver wire this week, Dave.
I think the first name that you can go after is Josh Palmer in Los Angeles. He's coming off of a concussion, but also off of a bye week. He practiced on Monday. He should be cleared and good to go. And because we know there's no Mike Williams, and because the matchup is so good for the Chargers against the Falcons, I think he's almost a must-start fantasy wide receiver, a number 2 type of wideout. You can flex him if you want, but he was out there as of yesterday in 70% of CBS Sports leagues. I mentioned Dobbs. Claypool is worth adding, just not necessarily starting this week. And what about Rondale Moore, who 2 games ago played on the outside a lot for Arizona, really delivered a dud. And then last week, he played in the slot a little bit more, got some more targets and catches, made a nice play after the catch, broke some tackles along the way. He's got some opportunities in a PPR league to be good for around 13 or 14 points, and he's out there in a little less than half of CBS Sports leagues.
Dave, last thing from me, and then one quick fan question. Nyheim Hines, you mentioned he got traded. Chase Edmonds also got traded. Mm-hmm. What do you think of the fantasy value of those guys on their new teams?
Edmonds is a no-go for me. In fact, I'm really not a fan of any of the Broncos running backs until something shakes out there. On the day they traded for Chase Edmonds, they said Melvin Gordon's the starter, and it's been Latavius Murray who's been the most productive fantasy running back since they acquired Murray 3 games ago. As for Nyheim Hines, I think the Bills have an idea in mind of using him as their passing downs back, their hurry-up offense back. You know, pretty much anytime Josh Allen wants to throw it around, Nyheim Hines makes sense to be in the backfield, and he's a better pass catcher than Devin Singletary, and he's more NFL ready. Obviously, he's been in the NFL for years, so NFL ready, not the right term, but he's got more experience than James Cook, and that's the rookie who they drafted. I think it's terrible for James Cook, and he's not going to be a factor. It hurts Devin Singletary, kind of pushes him into that flex range. And I think Nyheim Hines in PPR could be good for around 10 points a week. Would love to have him on my bench, if not used as a spot start, once he gets acclimated to what Buffalo is doing.
I have one league where I just cut him last week. I'm so ticked. I could use him.
We got one question.
Who'd you cut him for?
Who'd I cut him for? I don't even remember at this point. I don't remember off the top of my head.
That's bad.
That sucks.
We got one question from the
Mike.
internet here. Dave, just a reminder, if you're not a subscriber, make sure you subscribe. You can join and become a member. The button to join is right by the subscribe button on our homepage. This is from Joe Roscos. He says, what defense am I playing on the off week for San Francisco?
Go look for the Seahawks. I like the way that their defense has been playing over the past few weeks. They're taking on Arizona. Cardinals have allowed at least 11 fantasy points to 2 of the past 3 defenses they faced. Seattle scored at least 9 fantasy points in every game this year, except for one. That was that high-scoring shootout at New Orleans. And the last time these 2 teams got together, very few points scored. Good defensive performance for Seattle. I would look their way first.
Great stuff, Dave, as always. Everybody check out DaveCBSSports.com. Unlike a lot in the fantasy community, Dave actually knows football much better than most of the other guys do in fantasy. He gives you this great analysis here in just a little bit, and he does even better job. He does all the streaming videos. He's got his trade chart. You do excellent. You're the best, Dave. I appreciate it as always. Thanks, man.
I love it when you say that, because there have been times where I've been a little off on my advice, and you're like, what are you thinking? What are you doing? This isn't right. And, I hear it from you.
Wait,
so it's nice to hear the positives.
Dave,
What's your
nobody's
Twitter
getting it
handle?
At Dave Richard.
At Dave Richard. All one word. No underscores, no S's.
He's great. Everybody gets it wrong. I mean, you can't get it right all the time. So, what are you going to do? Thanks, Dave.
You got it, guys. Good luck in your leagues this week.
All right.